My name is Harper Williams. I'm 40. Last Thursday at 9:32 a.m., I was standing in my salon with scissors in my hand, cutting Mrs. Chen's bangs, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 3 years. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. My hands started shaking so badly, I had to set the scissors down. "Excuse me," I said to Mrs. Chen. "I need to take this." I stepped into the storage room and answered. "Hello? Harper." My brother Graham's voice slithered through the speaker like oil on water. "We need to talk about the vineyard. I'm giving you until 6 p.m. today to sign the transfer papers, or I tell everyone what really happened to your daughter 15 years ago. Every detail, every lie. I have the hospital records, Harper. I have the police report you thought was sealed. I have photographs. Sign the papers or I destroy you." The room tilted. My back hit the wall. Through the crack in the door I could see Mrs. Chen checking her phone, waiting patiently. Beyond her the salon was full, 4 stylists, 9 clients, the scent of developer and hairspray, the sound of blow dryers humming. My life, my business, everything I'd built after crawling out of the hole Graham and our mother had thrown me into 25 years ago. "You can't have it," I whispered. "That vineyard was Robert's. He left it to me. Not you, me." Graham laughed, cold and sharp. "Robert wasn't even your real father. He was a man our mother married when you were 12 because she needed money. He meant nothing to you. But that land? That 15-acre vineyard estate with the winery equipment and the tasting room and the guest cottage? That's worth $1.5 million, Harper. And it should have been mine. I'm the real son. I'm the one who deserves it. So here's how this works. You sign those papers at my lawyer's office by 6 o'clock tonight or tomorrow morning. Everyone in this town learns what kind of mother you really are. Your clients, your employees, your daughter, if she doesn't already know." My throat closed. "Graham, please. 6 o'clock. Anderson and Burke Law Offices, Suite 301, Riverside Plaza. Don't be late." He hung up. I stood there for 4 minutes and 18 seconds. I know because I watched the clock on the wall, trying to remember how to breathe. Then I walked back out, smiled at Mrs. Chen, picked up my scissors, and finished her haircut with steady hands even though I was dying inside. Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time is it there. Let me take you back 23 years to the day I met Robert Hale. I was 17, sitting on the front steps of my mother's house on Elmwood Drive, smoking a cigarette I'd stolen from her purse. My left eye was swollen shut from where she'd backhanded me that morning for talking back. I'd asked if she could buy me a winter coat, since mine didn't zip anymore. Graham, 21 and home from college for the weekend, had watched the whole thing from the kitchen doorway, smiling into his orange juice. A silver sedan pulled up. A man got out, tall, maybe 50, with gray at his temples and kind eyes. He looked at me, at my eye, at the cigarette. He didn't say anything judgmental. He just said, "You must be Harper. I'm Robert. I'm here to take your mother to dinner." "She's inside," I said, "probably getting ready to pretend she's someone nice." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "And you? Do you pretend?" "No, sir," I said. "I'm not good at it." "Good," he said. "The world has enough pretenders." He married my mother 6 weeks later. I thought he was a fool. I thought he'd be just like her, all charm on the outside, all cruelty behind closed doors. But Robert was different. He saw things. He noticed when I flinched. He noticed when Graham made cutting comments disguised as jokes. He noticed when my mother forgot my birthday, but threw Graham a party with 200 guests. 3 months after the wedding, Robert knocked on my bedroom door. "Harper, I bought something. I need your opinion." He drove me 40 minutes outside town to a property I'd never seen. Rolling hills, rows of grapevines, a stone farmhouse with a wraparound porch. 15 acres of land that smelled like earth and possibility. "I'm starting a vineyard," he said. "Small batch wines. I need help. Your mother says you're good with your hands, good with details. Would you work with me? I'll pay you. Teach you the business. I stared at him. Why? Because, he said, meeting my eyes, you need to know you're capable of building something beautiful. And I need to prove to you that not everyone in your life is going to hurt you. I worked that vineyard every weekend for 5 years. Robert taught me about soil pH and brix levels and fermentation temperatures. He taught me about patience, about nurturing something from nothing. He taught me that love wasn't loud and dramatic, it was consistent. It showed up. It kept promises. When I turned 22 and told him I wanted to go to beauty school instead of college, my mother screamed at me for an hour. Graham called me the family disappointment. But Robert drove me to my first day of classes, helped me rent a chair at a salon, and told me, build something that's yours, Harper, something no one can take away. The vineyard thrived. By the time I was 30, Robert had won awards for his Pinot Noir. By the time I was 35, I'd opened my own salon. We had dinner together every Sunday, just the two of us, at the vineyard house. My mother and Graham rarely came. They were too busy with Graham's tech startup, with their country club memberships, with their perfect golden child life. Robert got sick 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. He had 6 months. He called me to the vineyard on a Tuesday afternoon in October, when the vines were heavy with grapes, ready for harvest. Harper, he said, sitting on the porch where we'd had that first conversation 20 years earlier. I'm leaving you the vineyard. All of it. The land, the equipment, the business, everything. Your mother gets the house in town and her accounts. Graham gets nothing from me because he never wanted anything from me except money. But you loved this place. You built it with me. It's yours. I started crying. Robert, I can't. Yes, you can. He took my hand. His grip was weak, his skin paper thin. Harper, your mother and Graham are going to come after this. They're going to try to take it. I know them. I've watched them for 23 years. So I'm telling you now, I've made preparations. If anything happens, if they try anything, there's someone who can help you. But you have to promise me you'll fight. Promise me you won't let them bully you into giving up what's yours. I promise, I said. He squeezed my hand. You were the daughter I never had, Harper. The good one, the real one. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise. He died 3 weeks later. At the funeral, Graham didn't even look at me. My mother cried prettily into a handkerchief. And when the will was read, Graham's face went so red, I thought he'd have a stroke. This is bullshit, he hissed in the lawyer's office. She manipulated him. She's a manipulative, lying. Mr. Wolfe, the lawyer said firmly, the will is ironclad. The vineyard belongs to Miss Williams, legally and permanently. Graham stood up, knocking his chair backwards. He leaned across the desk, pointing at me. You think you deserve this? You think you're special? You're nothing, Harper. You've always been nothing, and I will make sure you lose everything. Graham, my mother said, putting a hand on his arm. But she didn't tell him he was wrong. She didn't defend me. She just looked at me with those cold blue eyes and said, Robert always did have a blind spot where you were concerned. I left without saying a word. For 2 years, I ran the vineyard. I hired a manager, kept the business going, showed up for harvest. I loved that land. Every vine, every stone, every sunset that turned the hills gold. And then, 3 months ago, Graham started calling. First, it was offers. I'll buy the vineyard from you, fair price. We can keep it in the family. I said no. Then it was guilt. Mom's getting older, Harper. She should have that property. It's where she and Robert spent time together. Don't you think you're being selfish? I said no. Then it was threats. You won't be able to keep it up. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to run it into the ground, and then it'll be worthless. I stopped answering his calls. And then came last Thursday. The hospital records, the police report, the secret I'd buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself it never happened. I was 25, working at a salon downtown when I met Carter. He was handsome, charming, attentive. We got married after 6 months. I got pregnant after 8 months. And by my second trimester, Carter's charm had turned to control, then to violence. The night my daughter was born, I had a black eye and 3 cracked ribs. I told the hospital I'd fallen downstairs. They didn't believe me. They filed a report. Social services got involved. But I ran. I took my newborn daughter and disappeared for 3 years. Changed cities, changed jobs, changed names on paper while I saved money and filed for divorce and restraining orders. By the time I came back, I'd legally changed my daughter's last name to mine. I'd gotten full custody. Carter was in jail for assault, a different victim, but it was enough. My daughter was safe. I was safe. But Graham knew. He'd always known. He'd hired a private investigator 5 years ago when Robert first got sick, digging up everything he could find to prove I was unworthy of inheriting anything. Now he was going to use it. I spent that entire Thursday afternoon cutting hair with shaking hands, smiling at clients, pretending I was fine. At 5:45 p.m., I closed the salon early and drove to Riverside Plaza, Suite 301, Anderson and Burke Law Offices. Graham was waiting in the conference room wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses named Kenneth Burke, slid papers across the table. "Transfer of property deed," Kenneth said. "You sign here, here, and here. The vineyard becomes Graham's property. In exchange, these documents," he tapped a manila folder, "remain confidential." I looked at the folder. "Can I see them?" "No," Graham said. "You don't get to see them. You just get to sign." "And if I don't?" Graham smiled. It was the smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up, the one that meant he'd won and knew it. "Then tomorrow morning, I send copies to your daughter, to your clients, to every parent at your daughter's school, to the state licensing board for cosmetologists, and I make sure everyone knows that Harper Williams is a liar who endangered her own child, who fled the state to avoid investigation, who falsified documents. You'll lose your business, your reputation, your relationship with your daughter. Everything." My hands were flat on the table. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "Graham, that's not what happened. You know that's not what happened." "I know what the documents say," he replied. "And that's all anyone else will know too." I looked at the papers. The vineyard, 15 acres, Robert's legacy, my inheritance, the one thing I had that proved I was worth something. "You have 1 minute to decide," Kenneth said, checking his watch. I picked up the pen. Graham leaned back in his chair, victorious. "Smart choice, Harper. For once in your life, you made a smart—" I put the pen down. "No." "Excuse me?" "No," I said again, louder this time. "I'm not signing." Graham's face changed. The smile disappeared. "Harper, don't be stupid." "Send the documents," I said, standing up. "Send them everywhere. Tell everyone. Put it on the front page of the newspaper if you want. But you're not getting that vineyard." "You'll lose everything," Graham shouted, standing too. "Everything. Your business, your reputation, your daughter will never forgive you." "Maybe," I said. "But Robert told me to fight, and I promised him I would." I walked out of that office while Graham screamed behind me. I drove home, hands shaking so hard I had to pull over twice. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried for 20 minutes straight. Then I called my daughter. "Sweetheart," I said when she answered, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." I told her everything. About her father, about the violence, about running, about changing our names, about the fear that had lived in my chest for 15 years, about Graham's threats. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "Mom, I'm 23 years old. Did you really think I never wondered why I didn't have a father? Why you flinched when someone raised their voice? Why we moved so much when I was little?" "I wanted to protect you," I whispered. You did protect me, she said firmly. You saved us both. And if Uncle Graham thinks he can use that against you, he's wrong. Tell him to send the documents. I'll tell everyone myself that my mother is the bravest person I know. I cried again, but this time, it was different. The next morning, Graham didn't send anything. He was bluffing, I realized. He'd been counting on my shame, my fear, my desperate need to keep the secret buried. But secrets only have power if you protect them. I went to work, cut hair, smiled at clients, lived my life. And 3 days later, I got a call from a lawyer named Patricia Vance. Ms. Williams, she said, my name is Patricia Vance. I was your stepfather Robert Hale's private attorney. He instructed me to contact you if anyone attempted to coerce you into signing over the vineyard property. Has something happened? I told her everything. Graham's threats, the blackmail attempt, the documents he claimed to have. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Ms. Williams, can you come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? There's something Robert left for you. He said you'd know when you needed it. I went to her office the next afternoon, a small space in an old building on Laurel Street, 3rd floor. Patricia was 60-something, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it in Robert's handwriting. He gave this to me 3 years ago, Patricia said, right after he was diagnosed. He said, when Graham tries to take the vineyard, and he will, give Harper this, she'll need it. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. I read it right there, standing in Patricia's office, tears running down my face. Dear Harper, if you're reading this, then Graham has tried to take the vineyard from you. I'm sorry I couldn't stop him while I was alive. But I spent the last 3 years of my life making sure he couldn't win. Do you remember the Sunday dinners we had every week? The conversations on the porch? I was listening, Harper, to every story you told me about your past, about Carter, about running, about protecting your daughter. And I was documenting it all. I hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt like Graham did, but to find the truth. The police reports that showed you were the victim, the hospital records that proved Carter's violence, the testimony from the women's shelter that protected you, the character witnesses who watched you rebuild your life, the evidence that you were a mother who sacrificed everything to keep her child safe. It's all here. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of proof that you are not what Graham will try to make you out to be. I also have something else, recordings. Graham doesn't know this, but 2 years ago, when he asked me to change my will to leave him the vineyard instead of you, I recorded the conversation. He told me you didn't deserve it because you were damaged goods. He told me you were a liar and manipulator. He told me he'd find a way to take it from you after I was gone. I have 6 hours of recordings, Harper. 6 hours of Graham revealing exactly who he is. The original deed is with Patricia. The vineyard is yours, legally and permanently. Nothing Graham does can change that. But if he's threatened you, if he's tried to blackmail you, then he's committed a crime. Patricia will help you decide what to do next. You were never nothing, Harper. You were always the strong one, the brave one, the one who survived. Don't let him make you small. All my love, Robert, P.S. The Pinot Noir from 2021 is aging beautifully. You should open a bottle when this is over. You earned it. I read the letter 3 times. Then Patricia slid a flash drive across the desk. The recordings, she said. All 6 hours, plus the investigation report, plus sworn statements from 17 people who can testify to your character and Graham's cruelty. Robert was very thorough. What do I do with this? I asked. Patricia leaned forward. That depends on you, We can file criminal charges against Graham for attempted extortion and blackmail. We can sue him for emotional distress, or... She paused. Your family has a Thanksgiving dinner coming up in 2 weeks. 40+ people, from what Robert told me. We can give Graham a chance to confess publicly and apologize, or we can turn this over to the authorities. My stomach clenched. Why would we give him a chance? Because Robert asked me to, Patricia said gently. He said Graham was poisoned by your mother's favoritism. that he never had a chance to be anything but what she made him. Robert wanted to give him an opportunity to be better, but only one opportunity. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "Okay, we do it at Thanksgiving." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Graham called 6 times. I didn't answer. My mother called twice, demanding to know why I was causing trouble. I didn't answer that either. I worked. I cut hair. I went to the vineyard on weekends and walked the rows of dormant vines, preparing for winter. And I practiced what I'd say when the moment came. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and clear. The dinner was at my mother's house, the big colonial on Westmont Avenue with the circular driveway and the chandelier in the foyer. 43 people. 3 generations. My mother, Graham and his wife, my aunts and uncles and cousins, my daughter, and me. I arrived at 4:30 p.m. with Patricia Vance and a briefcase full of documents. Graham saw me walk in, and his face went tight. "What is she doing here?" he asked my mother. "It's Thanksgiving, Graham," my mother said. "Family is family." We sat down to eat at 5 p.m. 4 tables pushed together in the dining room, covered in linen and china and crystal glasses, turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce. My mother said grace. Everyone ate. Graham sat at the head of the table, playing the role of successful oldest son, telling stories about his business, making everyone laugh. At 6:15 p.m., during dessert, my mother stood up and tapped her wine glass. "Before we finish, I want to say how grateful I am that we're all here together. Family is the most important thing, and I know Robert would have wanted us to stay close, to support each other, to—" "Actually," I said, standing up, "I need to say something." The room went silent. Graham's eyes narrowed. "Harper, sit down." "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to speak, and you're going to listen." 3 weeks ago, Graham tried to blackmail me into signing over the vineyard Robert left me. He threatened to expose private information about my past unless I gave him property worth $1.5 million. He told me I'd lose everything: my business, my reputation, my relationship with my daughter. He gave me 1 hour to decide. Gasps around the table. Aunt Linda's fork clattered to her plate. Uncle James's face went red. Graham's wife Elena looked at him in shock. "That's a lie," Graham said, standing. "She's lying." "I'm not lying," I said. "And I have proof." I nodded to Patricia. She opened the briefcase and pulled out a transcript. "This is a recording of a conversation between Graham Wolfe and Robert Hale, dated April 12th, 2 years ago. Graham asked Robert to change his will. When Robert refused, Graham said, and I quote, 'Harper doesn't deserve anything. She's damaged goods. She abandoned her kid for 3 years. She's a liar and a fraud. And when you're gone, I'll make sure everyone knows it.'" Patricia pressed play on a small speaker. Graham's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. "She doesn't deserve anything. She's damaged goods." The table erupted, everyone talking at once. Graham's face had gone from red to white. "Where did you get that? That's illegal." "It's not illegal," Patricia said calmly. "Robert was in his own home. California is a one-party consent state. He had every right to record, and he recorded 5 more conversations just like it. Hours of you planning how to take the vineyard from Harper after he died." I didn't," Graham stammered. "You tried to blackmail me," I said. My voice didn't shake. "You threatened to expose that I escaped domestic violence because you thought it made me look weak. You thought my shame was worth $1.5 million. My mother stood up. "Harper, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Mom." I looked at her. "You raised Graham to believe he was entitled to everything. You raised him to believe I was worth nothing. And when Robert chose differently, when he saw value in me, Graham couldn't accept it. So he tried to destroy me." Graham slammed his hand on the table. "You don't deserve that vineyard. You didn't even know Robert before he married Mom. I'm his—" "You're nothing to him," I said quietly. "He told me that himself. He said you only ever wanted his money, never his time, never his love." I spent 20 years building that vineyard with Robert, 20 years of harvests and pruning and learning everything he had to teach. Where were you, Graham? At the country club, at your startup, anywhere but with him. This is ridiculous, Graham said, but his voice had lost its power. You can't prove— I can prove all of it, Patricia said. She pulled out another folder. Hospital records documenting that Harper was a victim of domestic violence, police reports, testimony from the women's shelter that helped her, character witnesses, court documents showing she legally obtained full custody of her daughter and protective orders against her abuser, plus documentation of your blackmail attempt, including the transfer papers you prepared at Anderson and Burke law offices 3 weeks ago. Elena was staring at Graham, tears running down her face. You did this? She whispered. Elena, I can explain. You tried to blackmail your sister? Aunt Linda said, her voice sharp. Graham, how could you? She took what was mine, Graham shouted. That vineyard should have been mine. Robert was supposed to leave it to family. Real family. She is real family, my daughter said, standing up. Her voice was shaking but strong. She's more real than any of you. My mother saved me. She gave up everything to keep me safe, and Uncle Graham tried to use that against her because he's so pathetic he can't accept that someone chose her over him. The room went dead silent. Graham's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the table, at 43 faces staring at him with disgust, shock, disappointment. At his wife who was crying. At my mother who had gone pale. At uncles and aunts and cousins who were shaking their heads. He started. I didn't mean, it wasn't supposed to. You have two choices, Patricia said. You can apologize to Harper right now, in front of everyone, and sign a legal agreement never to contact her or attempt to access her property again, or I file criminal charges for attempted extortion on Monday morning, and you can explain this to a judge. Graham looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in 40 years, I saw something like fear in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. Louder, I said. I'm sorry, he shouted. Okay? I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have, I didn't. His voice broke. I just thought, I'm the oldest. I'm the son. I thought I deserved it. You thought wrong, I said. Sign the agreement. Patricia slid papers across the table. Graham signed with shaking hands. Elena watched, crying silently. My mother sat down heavily, her face in her hands. When he finished, I took the papers. I looked at Graham, this man who'd spent 40 years making me feel small, worthless, less than. This man who'd tried to take the one thing I had that proved I mattered. I'm not going to press charges, I said. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I don't want to spend another minute of my life thinking about you. You're done, Graham. You don't get to be in my life anymore. You don't get to call me, email me, show up at my business, or contact my daughter. You don't get access to the vineyard ever. And if you break this agreement, Patricia will make sure you go to prison. Do you understand? Graham nodded, unable to speak. I turned to my mother. And you need to ask yourself why you raised a son who thinks cruelty is the same as success. Then I left. My daughter and Patricia walked out with me. We left them all sitting there in silence, the Thanksgiving dinner ruined, the family fractured, the truth finally out in the open where it couldn't hurt me anymore. 3 weeks later, Graham's wife filed for divorce. My mother didn't call. My extended family split. Some reached out to apologize, some stayed loyal to Graham. I didn't care either way. I kept working, kept running the vineyard, kept living my life. 6 months later, I was at the vineyard on a Sunday afternoon in May, sitting on the porch where Robert and I used to have our conversations. The vines were green with new growth. The sun was warm. A bottle of the 2021 Pinot Noir sat open on the table next to me. Robert was right. It had aged beautifully. My daughter came up the steps with a picnic basket. Brought lunch, she said. We ate sandwiches and drank wine and watched the vines grow. She told me about her new job, about the guy she was dating, about her life. And I realized something. This was what Robert had wanted. Not revenge, not punishment, just this: peace, and land, and the freedom to build something beautiful. Mom, my daughter said after a while, I'm proud of you for fighting back, for not letting him win. I almost did let him win, I admitted. I was so scared of the secret getting out that I nearly gave him everything. But you didn't, she said. That's what matters. She was right. A year later, my life looked like this. The salon was thriving. I'd hired 2 new stylists. The vineyard had its best harvest yet. I'd started offering tours and tastings on weekends. My daughter came to visit every Sunday, and we'd sit on that porch and drink Robert's wine and talk about everything and nothing. Graham moved to another state. I heard through cousins that his business failed, that his divorce was ugly, that he was living in a small apartment and working a regular job for the first time in his life. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt free. I visited Robert's grave on the anniversary of his death. I brought flowers and a bottle of wine and sat on the grass next to his headstone. You were right about everything, I said. Graham did exactly what you said he'd do, but you made sure I had what I needed to fight back. Thank you for that. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for loving me like I was real. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, birds sang. I poured a glass of wine and left it on his grave, the way I used to leave coffee on the porch when we'd talk. The vineyard's doing great, I said. You'd be proud. And I knew, somehow, that he was. If you're watching this and someone's tried to control you with your own shame, with your own secrets, with the parts of yourself you tried to hide, type, I own my story in the comments. Or if you're still learning to take that power back, type, I'm reclaiming it. Both are acts of courage. Both are victory. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here. And remember, your past doesn't define your worth. What you survived doesn't make you less. It makes you a survivor. And that's something no one can take away.